80% of the men who had taken their own lives in the UK had sought out help. 95% of them were deemed as low risk or no risk, meaning that the therapists that they were seeing couldn't identify that they were at risk for suicide.
15% of women say that they'd be willing to date the men under 5'8".
A lot of this has nothing really to do with the average female choice and preference.
Men are 5 times more likely to say they have no close friends.
Male-oriented spaces have collapsed over the last couple decades.
43% of U.S. children live without their father.
We've been raised by the men who were raised by the men that came back with incredible trauma from World War II.
Yeah, I want to talk about porn brain.
What will eventually happen is that, and this is research backed, is that there's this thing called young man syndrome. Do you know young man syndrome?
No.
Young man syndrome is this period of time where the highest mortality rates happen, the highest suicide rates happen, the highest injury rates happen for young men. And it's between the ages of 16 and 26.
16 and 20, that's a long time.
Right.
10 years, you can do a lot of damage to
You can do a
yourself
lot of
in 10
damage.
years.
But I think that's this period of time where young men are trying to sort out their relationship to risk-taking, relationships and sex, their own identity. And we have a very externalized way of trying to sort those things out. You know, it's not like an internal process. It's usually not an internal social process. It's like, I got to go out into the world and try and grapple with who am I and who am I socially and contextually within the world. And a lot of the times that leads to us doing really stupid things. You know,
Jeez.
I was 19 and bought a 1,000cc motorcycle.
I was going to say, it's these
like,
guys who ride bikes, no helmet on the highway, and they're lane splitting, and you're like, you know that if you hit like a rock, you're dead. You're a meat cran at that point. Yeah.
It's over.
And even with a helmet, what if someone is still doing this at like age, 45, asking for a friend?
Yeah, I mean, there's probably a certain propensity towards trying to feel alive through taking risks. I think
not even just the risk, there's the whole like finding my identity, trying on new things.
Yeah.
I feel like I'm still doing that. Honestly, I'm not doing as many dangerous things.
Well, that's fair.
Okay.
That's fair. Yeah, I think it's a lot of the times, this is a whole different subject, but what we psychologically do with things like trauma and abuse and abandonment and attachment issues is there's a whole bunch of ways that we have maladaptive strategies to try and deal with the pain and the suffering that can coincide with that. So for some people, they sexualize those wounds and they try and explore them and figure them out by, different risky sexual behaviors. And then for other people, they will take crazy risks with money. Or they'll take crazy risks with gambling, or they'll, or relationships, or in their career. And so some of those things can show up in that way. But I think what you're talking about is just kind of like a normal, I'm trying to figure out who I am. I'm trying to figure out what's my purpose, what's my function in the world. And I think that's a big question for a lot of men who feel very rudderless in today's society. And we see this like collapse of young men in today's society. So
I want to talk about loneliness first, I think, because that's the loneliness epidemic that they call it. It seems very real. I'm ashamed to admit this. I thought it was kind of a BS thing because I didn't really, 2020 hindsight, I probably did experience it, but I forgot about it. And also a lot of my friends never talked about it. But the more I talk with men who are fans of the show, for example, in our advice inbox on Fridays or just online or just even on Reddit, I realize, and look, this is an online forum, so it self-selects a little bit for maybe people that are online all the time and are lonelier. But I see and hear about this constantly. Guys feel like they have very few, and your stats that you sent me, many guys feel like they have no close friends.
Yeah.
That's actually almost hard to believe. It's hard to wrap my mind around that.
Yeah, I mean, you have to, I think in the broader context, when we sort of pull back, a lot of the male-oriented spaces have collapsed over the last couple decades. And
what is that? What is a male-oriented space?
Like places that are just for boys and men to gather. Things like Boy Scouts. It's not just boys anymore.
It's co-ed now.
It's co-ed. And a
is
lot
that a bad thing though? Let me pause on that because as an Eagle Scout, it seems cool that you can do that with your son and your daughter now. Yeah,
I mean, I think that we do need co-ed spaces, 100%, like no doubt. And throughout the course of human history, young boys have had spaces where they've learned and grappled how to be young men. And in many ways, manhood and even masculinity to some degree is something that is modeled for a young man. And so when we collapse those spaces where young men learn, here's how I deal with anger, here's how I deal with power, here's how I deal with feeling powerless, here's how I interact with women, here's how I be a good citizen. When those spaces start to collapse, a young man is left with a vacuum or a vacancy of learning how to go through this transitory period between being a boy and then being a teenager and then being a man, and the responsibilities that come along with that and the expectations that come along with that. And I think we've gone through this transition where for a period of time we told men, this is exactly how you have to be. You have to fit into this box and fit into this mold. It was kind of constrictive. And then that shifted, and for the last decade or two, how manhood and masculinity has been formed is here's all the things that you shouldn't do.
Yeah.
Don't do any of these things. Don't be any of these things. But we haven't actually created direction for men. And so for a lot of guys, they fill in the gaps with, charismatic online personalities that are very enticing that fill that void. So we do need some of these spaces because young men are going to go through these periods where they're looking for advice. And one of the things that I sent you is just the impact of fatherless homes.
Yeah, we can get into that in a minute. I do want to stick on the loneliness thing because it's really terrifying. 15% of men report having no close friends. In 1990, that was 3%.
Correct.
And if you had no friends in 1990, I don't know anybody. Well, I guess they didn't have any friends, so why would I know them? But I feel like there weren't that many guys that seemed chronically lonely. Like all of us played together, right? Yeah. Among men aged 18 to 24, 28% say they have no close friends. In contrast, only 10% of women report the same. So women are doing much better on this front. And in 2020, Harvard found 61% of men had felt serious loneliness in the past month.
Yes.
That's really damning. I don't think that existed when I was younger. No. I could just be wrong, but it looks like the data supports that. 1 in 5 men could not identify a best friend. I don't think I've ever had that situation in my whole life.
Yeah, me either.
27% of men said they had a best friend. Only 27% of men said they had a best friend they could talk to about personal issues.
Right.
That's really sad. This is like 75% of guys don't have anybody they can talk to about personal issues.
Right. Well, and these are a lot of the men that you see in the online forums that are trying to get some advice and some grasp on how to actually just operate as a human being in the world. How to be social, how to interact with people at the coffee shop. Not like never mind going up and asking somebody else for their phone number or going on a date, but just basic social things. And there's a lot of contributing factors to this. I do think not having fathers in the home has impacted this for sure. I think obviously the rise of social media has made it so much easier for people that are naturally more introverted, that have higher levels of social anxiousness and anxiety, to not have to deal with the stress.
To just never do anything.
Of just never doing anything. But then also there is this correlation for young boys that the more that they are incentivized to take risks, the more healthy and integrated they are in society. Healthy risks, not like dangerous, death-defying risks.
What's a healthy risk? Like asking a girl on a date?
Asking a girl on a date, risking rejection, like taking the risk sometimes to join a sports team, taking a risk to, go up to another guy at the gym, in high school and start up a conversation, and then maybe a friendship develops out of that. Talking to another guy at a party, over a drink and just striking up a conversation. Those are just little social risks that a lot of young men have not been taught to take, and they've not been incentivized to take. And so slowly it's chipped away at their capacity to even have some of these normalized social skills. And then I think the other thing is we've replaced relationship in a big way with technology, right? So I worked at Apple for a period of time and oversaw some of the retail stores in British Columbia. And I remember being in the retail store and seeing, kids that are like 2-3 years old just on iPads. And I think we've gone through this generation where instead of being relational and learning how to regulate your nervous system and just be with unwanted emotions, anytime that happens, what we see is young boys and young girls turning towards technology as a kind of salve, as a kind of digital soother for themselves when their system is, upset. And I think when you look at like porn usage is another good example.
Yeah, I want to talk about
You know,
porn.
young men use that, or men in general, really use that as a method to soothe themselves, and this creates even more loneliness because you have access to just so much.
Let's get into that. I want to drop these last few stats. Men are 5 times more likely to say they have no close friends than they were in 1990.
Yes.
25% of men say they have 5 or more close friends. So 75% of men don't have 5 or more close friends. It's insane to me. All right, so
well, do you have any notion
friends?
Of yeah? Do you have any friends,
Maybe.
Jordan?
Yeah,
Are you one of those?
Canada,
are you
though.
in the
You
stats?
don't know them.
I know. Yeah. Oh
different
yeah,
school.
we're fellow Canadians. I forgot about that.
Well, no,
Look at us here.
I'm from Michigan, so I'm a Canadian with shitty healthcare.
Okay,
So in America, I have to explain this joke now. In America, if somebody was like, "Hey man, you're a loser, you don't have a girlfriend," the most common lie in Michigan anyway was she lives in Canada or she lives in Ohio or goes to a different school and you don't know her. And so it became this meme as we became adults where somebody would be like, "Hey man, how long has it been since you've been out of work?" And I'd be like, someone will go, "He has a job, but it's in Canada." Like, "He has a job, it's in Ohio. You don't know the company, never heard of the company." Or like, "Hey man, are you dating anyone?" "She lives in Canada." So it's just because it's such a transparent lie. Yeah, no, I'm from Michigan, so I'm actually north of parts of Canada.
You're adopted Canadian.
Yes,
you're adopted Canadian.
A Canadian that can't get.
Did you
doctor's
when you
appointment.
turned 18 go across the border and go to strip clubs and
Yes,
bars?
only when I was 18 though, not when I was 16 and had a really shitty fake ID that said I was 18 because I couldn't pass for 21.
Right.
And then you go to Windsor and you buy beer at Joker's or whatever in Windsor. Or you go to some strip club and the girls are just like, "Are you a child? Because you look like a child."
Like you have no facial hair whatsoever.
And no money,
I at least had like the big sideburns at
lucky
16,
you.
so I could somewhat pass.
Yeah,
as an 18-year-old.
Not me. Although I didn't get in trouble trying to order. You know what? Actually, I must have passed because when you come back over the border, the customs agents were always like, "So, doing any drinking in Canada?" And they didn't bug me at all.
Yeah.
So I must have looked like maybe I was legally able to drink in Canada.
But imagine being a 16-year-old, 17-year-old, 18-year-old kid and having zero friends to go and do what you and I are talking about.
I know,
with.
that's
And it
sad.
doesn't have to be that. Like, I'm not talking about like every young man needs to go to the strip club and go drink booze and do that kind of shit. Like that's what I'm talking
Turned out
about.
to be a waste of time.
But just like the roaming around on bicycles and trying to figure one another out and like who you are.
Yeah.
And our identity psychologically is social in its nature, and so part of our psychological development actually requires other people. So to know who you are, you also have to be in relationship with other people because they mirror back parts of you. So it's an important developmental piece that I think a lot of young kids are missing out on. But I'm curious, do you have insight into what you think is causing so many young boys to collapse in their relationships?
There's a lot of factors, and I'm trying not to. The one on the top of my head is going to sound like I'm blaming women for it. So I want to qualify that I'm not. It's just fresh because I discussed it earlier this week and today. A lot of guys have told me. There was a post in our subreddit, the Jordan Harbinger subreddit, about why don't men approach women more, and one of the guys, and this is the most upvoted thing, said, because when we do that, we get called creepy. And now, instead of just being rejected, it can affect your career. It can affect your reputation at school. The risk is way too high. It could be filmed. You could be trolled on TikTok for it. And this has happened, I guess, to a few people in the subreddit. And that's really scary because, first of all, I remember trying to approach women when I was in my 20s, and it was very difficult. And no one had a smartphone. You didn't have to. That moment in time alone, as ephemeral as it was terrifying enough. And so most guys wouldn't do it. And eventually you'd get over it and it would be fine. And if you really made an ass of yourself, you just don't go to that bar again or something like that. Or, probably that would never even be a concern. Now the concern is you are immortalized forever in this moment where you did something silly, and it spreads like wildfire, and it literally poisons your job prospects or your academic career.
Totally.
So a lot of guys don't do things like that anymore, which is really sad. So the risk has become really high, and guys are just saying things like, "It's too risky, it doesn't make any sense." And then, of course, you also have apps now that guys can sort of hide behind, where they're like, nobody meets by approaching anyway, so they use apps.
Which is nonsense.
The apps are nonsense. I'd love to talk about the apps because you mentioned in the stats here, A recent poll on Bumble, one of these dating apps for people who don't know, shows that only 15% of women say that they'd be willing to date the men under 5'8".
Yeah.
That is, guys right now who are 5'7" or under are freaking out. However, I think the reason that this is important to qualify, and you can tell me if I'm just spouting BS here, this is in a vacuum. So
That's right.
It'd be like somebody saying, "Hey Jordan, would you rather date somebody that's super hot and rich, or just one of those things?" And I would go, "Oh yeah, I would like to date somebody that's super hot and rich, because then I have a super hot girlfriend who's rich." Let's say I was married, right? So that's the preference. But it's like, if I just met somebody that I liked, none of those other things would matter anymore. So this height thing, guys see that and go, "I'm doomed because I don't fit this preference. I'm now looking at this 15% of women, and then let's look the ones that are married, and let's take out the ones that I'm not attracted to. Oh, great! Now I'm only going to be looking at 0.0001% of the women in this app are going to match with me, and that's just not how it works." I will also say, women, I did this when I was younger and not married. I asked women how tall they thought I was after knowing them for a while. Almost every girl said 6 feet tall. I'm 5'10" with shoes on.
Right.
And even when I am next to them and they know how tall they are, they overestimated my height if I wasn't standing right in front of them in the moment. So what that told me was, it doesn't really matter. It's more of a feeling. They're not actually going, well, let's stand against the wall and see how tall you are. I dated women that were taller than me, and they would say things like, "You're not that much shorter," or they would say, "No, we're the same height." And I'm like, I literally can do this on top of my head, and I'm still not as tall as you. What planet are you on? And it was like more of an emotional decision that I just wasn't shorter than them. And that was it. I couldn't convince them with a ruler.
Well, so there's a couple of important things here. One, dating apps are designed for us to prioritize our preferences.
Yeah.
And the reality is that when you're in the real world, sometimes your preferences are more malleable and fluid than, is this guy 5'8"? Right? If he's funny, if he's charismatic, if you find him attractive, if there's just like an inherent spark with him, that whole is he 5'8" goes out the window, and it's completely irrelevant. The other thing is that, we have, obviously, men and women, we have our insecurities. And those things show up in the dating apps, and those things show up in our fear of rejection and all those different pieces. One of the main things that I've found is really interesting in a lot of the research around relationships, specifically in the area that you're talking about, is that our perception of what it is that women want is often a little bit different than what it is that they desire. And the other thing is that what we think women want, for example, in height or in something like, we're going to talk about this later on, the size of your penis is often way different than we as guys think. And so a lot of this has nothing really to do with the average female choice and preference, but more to do with sometimes our insecurities and our fears of being tall enough, being, whatever it is, girthy enough. God, am I going to say that word?
Yeah, you're going to say
I'm going to say that word on the podcast. So, but those things actually don't match up. And so when you look at the research, women will say sometimes, like for example, the 15% will be under 5'8", but if you get them into a social situation and there's a guy that's 5'6" or 5'7", and he's charismatic and funny, or he's just lovable, or he's attractive, that doesn't matter at all to them. And it really starts to fade away. Are there some women that are still like, I won't date a guy that's under 6 feet tall? Sure. But, maybe that's not your cup of tea anyway.
I think a lot of women outgrow that. Man, you just remind me. When I was in law school, we were moving out of a house, and we had to move some of the previous tenants' crap, like furniture. They just left it there. The landlord was like, oh, maybe these guys will want it. We didn't want it. We moved one of the beds, and we found a diary of a woman who was in a sorority. And of course we read that because we didn't know her. So it was like, look, this is going to be fascinating. She had a whole bunch on how all the pressure from her girls in her sorority was on dating taller guys, but she only connected with guys that were shorter. And she was eaten up inside about this because she didn't care, but she had all this pressure. And she's like, my goal is after school to just forget about how the whole pressure thing and just go for the guys that I like, but I can't do it now because the girls would make fun of her, which is ridiculous, like the dumbest thing ever. I know that sort of disproves part of our point about preferences, but it also shows you that the social pressure for this stuff even when you know it's dumb
Yeah.
and you're trying to outgrow it, it's really tough. I had a buddy who married a really attractive woman who was taller than him, and I remember someone said, like, in fact, at the table in front of him, we were all cool with this. We were like, so it doesn't matter that you're taller than him? And she's like, I remember she would say things like, well, he's really hot. Oh, he's really smart. He's really funny. All these things were true. And this is law school. It's all full of like smart people. And she goes, he's not that much shorter. And it was like, she was probably 5'9", 5'10", maybe even taller, and he was probably 5'4". I mean, this is a significant height difference. This was not like, oh, it's an inch shorter. I mean, it was noticeable, especially if she was wearing heels. I mean, it was just like, wow, okay, your wife is so much taller than you. So it was such a fascinating thing, because while it's a preference, it's like the behavior doesn't necessarily match the preference outside of the vacuum. And the problem with apps is you can filter so that you don't even see the people that don't fall in that preference, where you end up cheating yourself like crazy.
Right.
Because you can say like, oh, I only want a guy in this income level. But since it's a light preference and you wouldn't care about it in reality, now you're just only seeing people in that particular income level. Right. And you go, there's nobody on here that I click with. Okay, well, you did select millionaires only, and you're wondering why they're all shallow a-holes who are looking for models on an app.
Well, I think we as men often conflate norms with the rules, right? And
what do you mean?
There are norms, right? There are like normal, ideal preferences that a lot of women do have, right? Most women, if you ask them, they do want a man that's taller than them.
Yeah.
That is true. That's just statistically true. However, that's not a rule with no exceptions.
Yeah.
And I think that we as men sometimes we have this very like linear process to these types of things, where it's like that's just the way that every single woman is, because we want this very calculated, very linear process that helps us just kind of feel safe within the dating world, right? That allows us to be like, oh, if that woman's taller than me, then I shouldn't even bother approaching her, because she's not going to find me attractive. And those norms don't help us actually get into relationships. I have the exact same story. I know a woman who's 6 feet tall, and her husband is like 5'7".
Whoa,
you know?
okay.
And when they started dating, and they've been together for a long time, they've got 2 kids, they met in college, and same thing, she had a lot of pressure that was internalized, right? She was like, should I be doing this? And what will other people think?
Yeah.
And, there was other questions from her friends of like, well, don't you want a guy that's taller than you? And she just kind of had to say like, I actually genuinely love this guy. He makes me feel everything that I want to feel. And so it doesn't matter how tall he is.
Right.
And, and she kind of owns it in the sense that, she wears like 3-inch heels still. So she's like 6'2", 6'3", and it's just like, that's how their marriage is, right?
What's interesting about this is guys have a choice how they respond to this, right? Like he could have gone, you got to wear flat shoes only. I'm going to wear these, I don't know, whatever, shoes that have a big
lifts.
sole on it. Yeah, lifts.
I got some lifts in there.
And then also, like maybe I know a lot of women back when high school and college, they used to slouch because they were like, I don't want to be taller than the guys that are there because they won't talk to me. My friend Kalini used to do this all the time. We used to make fun of her. She actually had like a postural issue because she was constantly slouching.
Collapse in, yeah.
And then there's the other guys who, I mean, this is how I sort of chose to respond to it, because I was attracted to these taller women. I was like, no, be this giant Amazon. Like, I want people to look at us and go like, what the hell?
Right.
It'd be like, I used to say things like, don't make me come up there if you get sassy with me, and like, it was interesting. One day I met one of her exes, and this dude was legitimately like 6'7".
Yeah.
And he was like, oh, you're dating this short guy who's drunk, right? So he's a major a-hole. And this is this is early on. This is probably like our 3rd date or something.
Oh,
and I
man.
was like, oh man. So I didn't feel bad because I can't get taller, so I'm not going to let this dude emasculate me. But I was like, you know what? I'm going to meet you inside. You can handle your business. I'm not going to sit here and get abused in front of this girl from this guy. And I figured it's either like over with and this is going to be like a big thing or whatever. She came in and she was like, I am so sorry. That guy he's a terrible person. And I thought, oh, that's interesting. And later on in our relationship, she's like, you handled that the exact right way because I was so embarrassed. I didn't want you to have to see what I did next. And I was like, what was that? Because I did. I was looking out the window because I was like, if they make out, I'm out of here, right? And she tore him a new asshole. And the next time we ran into him at that bar, she was like, don't frickin' talk to me. And he just like ran out, like tail between his legs. He actually was the one who felt emasculated because he was like, wait, I got dumped for this frickin' little shit, you know? And so you really have a choice at how you can respond to this. But I also really understand why guys fall into, they're just on thin ice, right, with a lot of this insecurity. It's not only height. You mentioned earlier, and I'm going to blame you for this, penis preference studies, where...
I like that I just sent you just like this massive...
arson, dicks, and, incels. It's just the trifecta. But this was fascinating because I did look this up, and I did I went down a girthy rabbit hole.
Rabbit hole,
penis length and stuff. Among other things.
Girth rabbit hole.
And there was the unfortunate news was like the preference for women was still well above average, which is kind of funny because it doesn't make sense. If you look at the fact that we still exist and have not evolved to only men with larger dicks have not been the ones who reproduce. So this preference is already a little bit suspect, right? But then when you look into the data more, because I was like, wait a minute, I need background on this. It turns out that when you rank the preferences, women were choosing, I think it was like, they wanted 6.4-inch penis for short-term relationships and 6.3 for long-term relationships.
Yeah, you got it, yeah.
And so it's basically the same, but most men are like 5 or 5.5. That's the average globally. And I think in the United States, it's like 5 to 5.8 or something like that. I'm going off memory here. And so, like, all the guys in this comment section of wherever these things are posted are like, oh, my God, I'm screwed. Or, or that's why I need this pump or whatever. So they go crazy. But then when you look and you do further investigation, when they rank the size, it's like number 11. Before that is like, how fun is the guy? How does he make me feel? How smart is he? Height is in there. Are we compatible in other ways? Is he good looking? Income is like high. So it's like, oh, this is my preference. But in the preference range of preferences, this is way at the bottom.
Right.
It's kind of like, would you rather shop at Target or Walmart? And if you just say 97% of people said Target, you're like, oh my God, Walmart's going to go out of business.
Right.
Oh, but that was the 87th thing that was most important about which store they shop at. So actually, it doesn't matter almost at all. So I found that to be really fascinating. And I'm saying all this because I don't want my short kings out there to get in their heads when these pieces of info are far from definitive when it comes to your dating life. A lot of these surveys are done in a vacuum, and it's basically bro science.
Yes. Well, yes, and, I think that there's also an overemphasis on that we as men put, on those parts of our body. And
penis size is almost exclusively a guy thing, by the way. I researched this. Women were like, what? And guys are like, well, if I'm stretched this and bone pressed that, and like the girth is this, but when it's this, and if it's warm outside, if it's above 28 degrees Celsius.
If there's a light breeze just hitting the tip at the exact time, it's at full mast.
Exactly. And they're like, is it bone pressed, or is like, how hard do I press on the thing? Because if I do it, I get another 2 millimeters out of it. And it's like none of it ends up being relevant. In all these forums, I'm going to out myself here, but I did a lot of Reddit research. There's these like big dick problems subreddits where you think it's going to be a bunch of guys bragging, and mostly it's like guys who are trying to hide the bulge because they're suffering work consequences when they do presentations, or they're losing clients, or they like can't have sex with anyone because they have a giant dong. And it's like, oh, this is almost as bad as having something that's too small. Like there's anything on the extremes is actually really bad, unless you're in porn or something.
Well, if you look at the data around if a woman breaks up with a man or divorces a man because he has a small penis, is actually quite small.
Yeah.
Not the penis, but the actual, like the divorces and the separations, it's a very small amount because it's just not that big of a deal. And I often, when I look at this data, I often wonder, what would that data be like pre-dildos and pre-internet, where you can see, the largest penises on the planet, right? And so I think it's probably different 50, 60 years ago, but it is what it is today. And I think when men put so much emphasis on that, it just creates such deep insecurity.
It does.
And this is where, when you look at the data and the research, body dysmorphia amongst men is starting to skyrocket. And it's really crazy. You know, you have men getting leg extensions to get
I know.
taller.
I was going to mention
they're
that.
breaking their femurs and
Yeah.
installing these plates that they have to ratchet up. And, you know, going to Turkey to get hair transplants. And there's, you know, penis injections that they're now getting to have a larger, you know, girthier penis. And it's like a form of Botox.
I'm researching this right now. That's so funny you mention it. Bocox is one of the names.
No.
Or
No.
Scrotox, which is not exactly on the nose because it goes in the penis and not into the scrotum.
Oh my God.
I am doing a show on penile enhancement, and one of the doctors from this clinic called Upsize is like a really good authority on all this stuff. And he's like, come in and get it. I'll hook you up and you can see if it works and talk about it on your show. So I am going in on Saturday
No way.
to get Bocox done.
No way.
Here's the thing. The results, if they don't lie to you, are supposed to be like really modest. It's like, it's really not a big deal. And the reason it's also temporary. Otherwise I would never consider doing
Right.
it because, you know, I looked up everything that can go wrong and it's like pretty much nothing because Botox is pretty medium. So never let it be said we don't go the extra inch for
Yeah,
this
you're
audience.
really going...
Or the extra centimeter in this case.
the extra inch.
It's not, it's far from a mile. So apparently you can, it like adds like maybe a centimeter. And
Right.
candidly, one of the doctors was like, and that's if it actually does anything, because for some guys it just like doesn't do much or doesn't do anything.
Yeah.
It also relaxes some stuff, so it's like firmer erections, yada, yada, yada. So it's not about a lengthening thing, but the other stuff that they offer at this place and other places that I've researched, most of it is... At this place called Upsize, he only does like filler, which is like the filler that people get in their
put it in
lips.
your
He'll put it in someone's penis. But there's other clinics that do like silicone sheaths and stuff. That stuff is so dangerous.
Yes.
Because the complication rate is like 5%.
Yeah.
And look, if you had a complication rate from removing a fingernail of 5%, it's probably an infection, and like worst case, you lose your fingernail. What happens when they have to remove a silicone sheath from your penis? Well, you don't magically regrow that tissue.
Right.
You just have a scarred, disfigured dick for the rest of your life.
Right. Not worth it.
Not worth it.
Not
no.
worth it.
So like all the stuff that does extreme different stuff, and even that, by the way, won't make it longer. It just makes it girthier. Such an awkward word. So like, and guys will do this, and this doctor, Joel Pash, he's really honest. He's like, guys will come in and say, oh, I'm doing this for my wife. And he's like, no, you're not.
Yeah.
You're not. He's like, you want to do something for your wife? Take her to Paris. Do that for your wife. Don't spend your vacation budget on a half-inch girthier penis that she doesn't care about. Like,
Right.
if you have a super unhappy sex life because you have a really small member, okay, now it's like you're into like a medical kind of thing where it's like, you know. But if you're like in the average and you just want a monster dong, that's for you. Don't lie and say it's for your wife. She married you already. Right? Obviously, you had some sexual compatibility. If you can't get a date at all because you have a 3-incher, okay, like do what you can.
I'm sitting here thinking about two things. One, how different this conversation is than the one that you had with Richard Reeves, and
Yeah.
two, how
This is the bait and switch.
How we've gone from male loneliness to
dicks.
girthy dicks.
And
Yeah.
I'm going to do a whole show on it, so people who are really sad that we're going to change the subject from penises right now
that are really enjoying
they're
this
going to
part
get
of the
multiple
conversation.
hours. It's going to be a long double episode.
But I do think that there's a good point here, which is, you know, a lot of the times the social issues that we as men face are ridiculed.
Yeah.
You know, they're really ridiculed. There was a study that came out on the male loneliness side that showed that the average guy needs 2 nights a week with male friends for optimal mental health.
Oh, interesting. I do feel better when I have a hang sesh.
Totally.
Yeah.
And it was wild when the research came out and you saw the comment section. I mean, the amount of ridicule that was going towards like, you know, how ridiculous is this? And like, you know, why do men need that much time together? And, you know, it was just like, it was really telling, because I think for a lot of these issues, when men are suffering and struggling, it's often looked down on because the perception is that men are causing the suffering, the struggling. And so it's very challenging to talk about male loneliness, suicidal ideation, incels, lack of fathers, the role that has, a lot of the issues that guys face, dropping out of school, right? We have less men going to school than ever before, less men in the workforce than ever before. What ends up happening is that when these issues come up, there's almost like a vacancy or a vacuum of empathy and compassion because the perception is, well, men are the cause of this. And so pick yourself up by your bootstraps and just go fix it.
Yeah, it's fun. That bootstraps thing is funny because you know where that expression comes from?
I would assume a war.
I can't remember the exact bootstrap, which straps these are for, but the point is that it's actually physically impossible to pick yourself up by your bootstraps.
It's for pulling the boots onto your feet.
So when you say pick yourself up by the bootstraps, what you're saying is do something that is, this whole cliche is that it's actually impossible to do that.
Totally.
So I always found that ironic. By the way, that was a good pivot. I may come back to dicks, just fair warning.
Fair.
Probably not, though. I do want to talk about incels because I think this is a fascinating... Again, I'm going to do a whole show on incels because the phenomenon itself is fascinating to me. I used to really kind of look at these guys negatively, but I do have a lot of empathy for these folks, especially given my previous line of work, which many people know is going to be teaching men dating skills. There were guys that sort of, but for the grace of God, would have made a left turn, and instead they made a right turn and went into the self-improvement angle.
Yep.
But there were guys that gave up and became sort of incel red pill type guys. 67% of incels qualify for diagnosis of severe anxiety. That definitely makes sense.
Oftentimes severe social anxiety.
Yeah.
So they have severe anxiety, but their anxiety specifically around being in social situations, relationship situations. And so they are just chronically crippled by nervousness around even just talking to people, having normal interactions. And so this perception that incel men are, hate-fueled death monsters that want to go out and murder people is very, 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 very rare statistically. They are generally very afraid, very fearful people.
A lot of these, this is from my research on incels as well, a lot of these so-called like incel terror attacks turn out to not be that when you do a deep dive. There was one guy who ran a van into people in Canada, and when the CSIS or whatever, or Royal Canadian RCMP interrogated him, he was like, yeah, I didn't really mean that incel thing. I just did it for attention because he was a psychopath.
Right.
And he did that incel comment because he knew it would get clicks in media.
Yeah.
So they counted that as like incel murders people, but he was like, whatever, that's not even it. It wasn't even a thing. And then there's a couple really famous ones, Elliot Rodger, who murdered his roommates and then a bunch of other people. He also had other mental illness that had kind of a little bit, but not really. And it wasn't like I'm an incel and I'm doing this. He had all kinds of stuff that was going on, and that was a mass casualty. And that's kind of the only other one that's really out there. Meanwhile, there are maybe hundreds of thousands or even millions of incels, and most of them are just kind of bummed out and played Diablo 3 all the time. Right?
Well, I think that's where, this TV series on Netflix that got so much attention, Adolescence. Have you seen it?
Oh, I haven't watched it. I heard about it, though.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because they're trying to portray an incel. And there's a lot about it. There's a guy in the UK named William Costello, and he's like one of the lead researchers of incels. And they have some of the biggest body of work on research for,
Do you know him?
For incels. I mean, I follow him, and I've been wanting to have him on the show because he's super interesting. But, they found a whole, like when you dig into the data, like 47% of incel men are non-Caucasian.
Yeah, it says 42 in your notes
42,
here.
There we go. So, I think there's a perception that it's like angry white boys in their mom's basement.
That is 100% what I envision.
Which is not generally the case at all. Again, they're generally struggling with severe anxiety. They have mental health issues. Oftentimes, they need support and help. Quite often, they do come from fatherless homes, and when you look at it, they have really major challenges with like suicidal ideation.
30% of them think about suicide daily, which makes me so sad. Compared to the everyday population is 5% saying they had a suicidal thought once or more in the last year. Right. So this is heavy on suicidal ideation.
Yeah.
They have no relationships, no close friends. That's one of the sort of characteristics.
Yeah, and I think this is the empathy gap that I'm talking about when it comes to men. It's like these guys, and of course, it doesn't excuse behavior of going online and trolling women and, spewing hate towards women. I'm not excusing any of that, right? Like if that's happening from some of those guys, I'm not excusing any of that. And there is an empathy gap. These are some of the men in our societies that are struggling the most. They're thinking, 30% of them are thinking about self-harm
That
or
makes me
suicide
sad.
every
that makes me
day.
sad.
You know, and so we have to approach these conversations, I think, in a different way to understand, like, well, A, how are these young men getting to that place? And then B, how do we create structures and systems within our societies to circumvent that from happening more and more? Because it is happening more. You know, men are getting more socially isolated.
Yeah.
They are getting more lonely. They are lacking in male role models. And so when that continues to happen, they go into online gaming and, you know, they're on Twitch all the time, and then they're more isolated, and then their only friends are in the digital realm.
I'll tell you that one turning point for me, I met this is years ago. I met this show fan. He was a really nice guy. He ended up meeting my wife. We ended up hanging out, and I was like, he's shy, but he's like a sweet guy. I like him. I had a good time. I later found a bunch of his posts under another name that he was using, and they were crazy vitriolic, women-hating incel posts. And I saw him again, and I was like, can I ask you a question? You know, we had such a good time with you. You got along with Jen really well. What's the real you? And he was like, I think the one that you met was closer to the real me. And I was like, what is all this shit?
Yeah.
And he was like, I just get really angry about the state of my life, and I blame women for it, even though I know at some level it's really not them. They're just an easy target. And I find a lot of people agreeing with me when I post about this kind of thing because they're in the same situation. And that was really eye-opening for me, because he didn't want to do anything harmful to women. He didn't actually want bad things to happen to women. He just desperately wanted to not be alone.
Right.
And the outlet was just, oh, if I complain about women, all these other guys will pile on, and I feel like I have community.
Right.
That was really eye-opening and sad for me.
Yeah, they get incentivized, they get rewarded, they get social connection. Like a lot of the things that they're lacking, they get in spades, right?
If you read this, you would be like, wow, this guy's like one step away from going on a machete spree or like sexually assaulting someone. But then when you talk to him, he's like, I would, you know, he just would never do it. Has sisters that he has a good relationship with. Like, he's also had girlfriends in the past, and those relationships, by all accounts, ended kind of like more or less amicably. And it was shocking because it was like two different people. And even to this day, I'm like, God, but that angry guy is in there.
Right.
Scares me a little bit, you know?
Well, and I think sometimes, you know, when some of this data that we're talking about starts to come out, whether it's about dating apps or, you know, whatever it is, I think sometimes people are worried or scared that that's going to reinforce certain behaviors within men. I also think it's become much more socially acceptable. Like, there's just a gender war happening, and there are women who think the world would be better off without men. You know, like the other side exists of like all men are, you know, all men are evil, all men are rapists, like all men are this way. And there's a kind of loathing on the other side that in some ways has become more socially acceptable, largely because women don't generally tend to take the dramatic action that men do when they get that far off the rails.
Yeah, that's interesting. You mentioned that men's psychological issues are often misrepresented. I'm curious about, I'd love to talk about this. 75% of therapists in some states, more than 80% are women. So what, man? A lot of women understand men really well. I have female therapists. Why is that a problem?
It's not necessarily a problem. It's more about the macro picture of the vacancy of male role models. You know, there are certain things that men are going to be dealing with and struggling with that sometimes women just are not going to really understand. And the therapeutic industry is, I think, doing a disservice because it's approaching male issues from a female perspective. And
how so?
Well, when you look at a lot of the training that therapists go through, they don't really learn how to differentiate between resistance in a man or a woman. And how a man will show resistance versus a woman is oftentimes very, very different. Another version of that is how a man will signal that he's at risk for something like suicide. So there's a study, I think I sent you some of the data in the UK, that showed that 80% of the men who had taken their own lives in the UK had sought out help. And of those 80%, 95% of them were deemed as low risk or no risk, meaning that the therapists that they were seeing couldn't identify that they were at risk for suicide.
Yeah, that's terrifying.
You know, and that's a massive body of research, right? It's not like 10 or 20 guys, it's a lot of men. And so sometimes we miss out on the fact that when when people go to therapy, they're incentivized to express and talk about their emotions. Not a problem. That can be very helpful. I think for a lot of men, that's very, very helpful because we generally live in a culture of suppression, and in my book, I wrote about how within masculine culture, it's very common that we see strength as a byproduct of our ability and capacity to suppress our emotions.
Yep.
So the more that we can stuff shit down, the stronger and more capable we perceive that we're going to be, but it actually has the inverse effect. It actually
I wish I did
weakens
not
us.
fully agree with that. I'm like, that's me, definitely,
Yeah.
and my dad, and
Yeah.
probably my grandparents.
Totally.
Yeah.
And so we adopt this idea when in fact it's the inverse of that. We have to have some dominion over emotions.
Mm-hmm.
We have to be able to express them when necessary. We have to have some level of connection or mastery with them. But the big thing that the therapeutic industry misses out on is usefulness and competency. And so Richard Reeves, who you had on the show, they did this big study through the American Institute of Boys and Men, and they looked at the notes that men had left behind when they took their own lives. And the one word that stood out was useless, just chronically through all these notes. And so when men feel useless, that's where in society they feel useless, and in marriage, relationship, family, friends. The more useless a man feels, the more he can start to logically rationalize not being here.
Yeah.
And therapy is not optimized to help men be useful socially and relationally. And it is also not optimized to help identify when a man feels like he's lacking competence in something, and then help him to develop the systems to develop competence. Even if it's something simple as, I need to get better at setting boundaries in my relationship because I let my, girlfriend or wife or boyfriend walk all over me. Right? It's like, okay, well, that's a skill set that you can actually develop. And this is the difference, is that men actually look at these things as systems and skills that we need to develop.
Yeah.
And the therapeutic industry does not tailor it to that way. So like our tagline is, it's not therapy, it's training. Right? It's like, this is helping you to be more competent as a man. And if you can do that, you're actually going to up-level your level of confidence, right? So
Wow. Yeah, Richard Reeves, episode 1126. We do a deep dive into more on, we focused more on education gap and stuff like,
Workplace.
less on the dick gap. Yes. And more on the education and
I
workplace
like that I
gap.
got this side of you.
Yeah, you get the...
I feel much more prepared for that version than the education and the workforce gap.
I think it's because I just had more respect for him than I do for
Yeah,
you.
that's right. That's right. That's fair. That's fair.
No, you and I go way back.
I'm not a
I
researcher.
I just felt comfortable with it because I feel like we've known each other for
We've got that rapport. I feel like Richard Reeves would not engage in a conversation.
I think he would politely change the subject immediately. I could be wrong. I don't know. Maybe I'll try it next time he's on the show. I do. One bit of good news from your notes was that more men are seeking therapy than ever before.
Yeah.
I don't think we have less problems. So I don't think we necessarily have more problems. I think we are recognizing the problems more, I should say. So it's not just like, oh, more men are seeking therapy because more men have issues. I think these issues have always existed, but to your earlier point, we've just choked them down and drank them away or something like that. Like if you came back from Vietnam and you had PTSD, you just became an alcoholic or a drug addict, or just like beat your kids or something, or handled it in some other destructive way. I mean, there's a million stories like that. Or you just suffered in silence. Now I think guys my age, especially and younger, they're going to betterhelp.com/Jordan. They're talking about it, which I encourage. I mean, I do it. I feel a million times better after talking to a therapist, even if I'm just venting about something. Because to another one of your earlier points, if you don't have a best friend that you can do that with regularly, where is it all going?
Yeah.
Where is it going? You got to get those demons out, man.
Well, and that's the case for a lot of men, is that it's not that they have a vacancy of friends. Mm-hmm. It's that they actually have an absence of one or more friends that they can talk about meaningful shit with. That's actually the gap. And so a lot of men will say, no, I got buddies in my life. I have friends in my life.
Right.
But then if you dig a little bit deeper and you say, do you have men in your life that you can talk about meaningful, substantial challenges with, embarrassing challenges with, struggles that you're having financially, relationally, sexually? The answer is almost always no. So few men actually have guys in their life that they can say, hey, my wife or, my girlfriend and I were going through these challenges. We're trying to have a kid. It's not going well. Those types of conversations are becoming more prominent among men. I think it's becoming much more socially acceptable amongst men. And, I think as we start to break out of I was on Chris Williamson's show, and we were talking about, attachment, and we were talking about attachment disorders. And one of the things that I was talking about was that we've lived and we've been raised by the men who were raised by the men that came back with incredible trauma from World War II.
Yeah.
My grandfather fought in World War II, and what he and everybody else faced was insanely traumatic, insanely challenging. And some of the stories I heard my grandfather talk about were wild. And as a kid, I didn't think much of it because they seemed like, these didn't even seem real. But as an adult, you're like, holy shit, you saw that happen.
The Saving Private Ryan beach scene type stuff, yeah.
And then, they raised the next generation of men, and those men were, handed down the trauma that their fathers experienced and witnessed. And so I think we're just starting to really sift through that and sort through that and, and metabolize some of what a lot of men experienced post World War II.
Yeah, that's a really interesting point. There's a lot of this epigenetic generational trauma stuff too that's sort of new science. Have you heard about this at all?
Yeah.
Where I used to think it was a ridiculous argument where people would say, oh, well, if you're a black dude, you got generational trauma from this. And I was like, come on, that's not a real thing. Now it's like, oh, it kind of is. But it also explains why a lot of us Jews are a little weird, right? Like, okay, so a bunch of your family was in a pogrom and then the Holocaust and then another pogrom and then you came here and did it. And it's like, oh, okay, maybe I did inherit some shit.
Yeah, it activates certain genes in the body and genomes, and that makes a ton of sense.
Yeah, it makes a ton of sense. I'm really interested in that science, and I'd love to have somebody on the show who's an expert on it. The problem is, I don't know. I think it's so new. I don't even know if there is.
I can't remember the guy's name. I'll find it for you.
If you can, yeah.
There's a guy that wrote. It Didn't Start With You. I can't remember the author of the book.
Okay,
but
we can look it up later.
That's definitely somebody that you should have on the show.
I would love to talk about. I would be super interested in that. I would love to talk about going back to dicks. No, I want to talk about porn brain.
Yeah.
You mentioned porn. It's unfortunately, and I can tell by online comments and real life discussion with younger guys especially, porn is clearly the primary driver of sex education among men that I would say are maybe under 40. I mean, I'm 45. The online porn thing kind of started when I was in college, but it was a little nascent. It was easy to find, but it wasn't nobody I knew was addicted to it. And by the end of college, some guys you were like, dude, do you ever leave the house? So that sort of started then. But if you're under 45, under 40, you probably had porn in middle school. Mm-hmm. So I had, I don't know what, a half decade of hooking up with girls, maybe even having sex with girls before porn hit the scene, and then it was a slow ramp up. These other guys had porn way before they saw a real woman in the flesh, other than, from the neck up or whatever. So that's terrifying.
The
dial-up.
The dial-up loading line by line. You're there's eyes.
Yeah. Yeah, and you're like, oh, please be naked, and the rest of the
Yeah, please be hot and naked.
Please be hot and naked. And the guys who are under 40, their first exposure was probably a mobile phone that their friend is showing them.
Well, the research shows that most young boys are finding porn between 9 and 11 years old.
That's horrifyingly young.
Yeah, and you have to think about just the vast impact of chronic sensory overload.
Yeah.
If an 11-year-old boy opens up the internet and starts watching porn, he can, within a few hours or a few days, see more naked women in that span of time than any man throughout human history will have seen throughout his lifetime.
Yeah, it's scary to me to think, I always think about this, right, your point. If you lived 3,000 years ago and you were not a pharaoh or something like that, you probably saw, a handful, maybe you slept with a handful of women in your tribe if you were a real Chad going for it, right?
The Chad.
But to use an incel term. But that was it. And that was your lifetime, and you died when you were 26 or something from a stubbed toe.
Right.
And that was the end of it. Now you get these little kids who are essentially looking at these little clips or whatever of porn, and their brain is probably not evolved to handle that.
No.
And I don't think do we know what that does to your brain? What does it do?
The research on this, from what I've seen, is kind of varied. For some people, there's definitely desensitization is a big one.
How does that show up? Because
erectile dysfunction.
Really? Okay.
Yeah. So if you as a man watch too much porn for a long period of time, what will eventually happen is that, and this is research backed, is that you end up going down more like deeper, more intense forms of pornography.
Because you need novelty to
Because you
stimulate your
need
brain.
more novelty over time, and then that ends up desensitizing your system so that nothing actually really gets you aroused.
Nothing in real life, yeah.
Nothing in real life, yeah. But also then the porn that you watch, you have a harder and harder time getting aroused because you're so desensitized.
I see.
And so if you're a 9-year-old kid that starts watching porn and then, fast forward to
29.
Yeah, 29 years old, and you've been watching porn, every other day for 20 plus years, your system gets desensitized. And then on top of that, it skews and alters your perspective and perception of what sex should actually be like, right? Real life sex. And so, a lot of this. What?
I'm sorry. I just,
Back to the girth?
intrusive thoughts sometimes continue. Continue.
But it skews what you perceive sex to be. And so for men, what generally happens is this really, really hyper fixation on performance, lasting long, size, all those different pieces. And then depending on the pornography that they're watching, they'll need to replicate. Some men will need to replicate what they've been watching in porn in order to actually have, ejaculate or whatever.
Yeah. Wow.
So it can really screw up your real sex life,
I've heard that there's also, have you heard of death grip? Have you heard of this?
No.
This is,
oh, boy.
I swear this is real. I was like, this is fake. I got to look it up. Apparently, and it doesn't happen to everyone, obviously, but guys who watch a lot of porn, they start to increase the tightness of their grip on their penis. And eventually it gets so tight, part because of desensitization of nerves and stuff like that, that real vaginas don't work for them at all. And you see these relationship issues where guys can't do anything with their girlfriend or can never finish because they literally need this death grip. And you can undo it, but it takes you have to abstain from masturbation for 60 days. And these guys are essentially porn addicted, multiple time per day kind of guys. So they can't do that. It's very hard. And it ruins relationships. Imagine if your partner could never finish with you, but he's watching people swinging from the ceiling doing whatever novelty porn, and you're just like, well, I can't compete with that. Right? He's watching anime tentacle stuff.
Well, and then I think the interesting thing is that porn kind of plays a role in everything that we've been talking about so far. Number one, from an attachment perspective, it creates a kind of pseudo attachment. So
what do you mean?
So if you look at OnlyFans as an example, so first off, OnlyFans did I think in 2023 it did $6.6 billion, right? The women of OnlyFans just raked it in. They've accrued.
There's guys on there too.
There are guys on there. There are guys on there for sure, but they, on average, they are not doing nearly as well.
That's probably true. Yeah.
And when you break down what men are generally looking for, the women that are doing really well, a lot of them are the sort of next door, girl next door, girlfriend experience. They're offering this kind of pretend pseudo relationship. You have women that are doing fin subbing. I don't know if you've ever heard of this, but this is financially submissive. So a man will become a financial submissive to a woman.
Oh, and it's called fin
sub.
Fin dom, fin sub. I don't know the difference.
Yeah, she'll be a fin dom, and he's the fin sub.
Oh, okay.
So she'll basically tell him she'll text him and be like, send me $100 right now.
Yeah.
And basically they play this game of, instead of draining his nuts, they drain his bank account, right?
I had dinner with a friend yesterday, and she was telling me she has this very attractive female friend who's a really nice person. And everyone loves her. They have a nice circle of friends. And she was like, hey guys, they planned a trip to Las Vegas. She was like, hey guys, I'm bringing this guy that I'm dating. I have to warn you, our relationship is a little weird, and I just want to be upfront that we have this financial thing going on, and just so you guys know, it's going to be a little weird. And they're like, what do you mean, right? And she's like, you'll see when we get there. So they go out to dinner, and again, this is a very nice girl who's had a bunch of normal relationships, and they're like, oh, we want to meet your new boyfriend or whatever. They have dinner. They're going to they go to one of those Michael Mina nice restaurants or whatever, and the guys are like, okay, I had this and this and this. I owe $67, and the girl's like, John, pay for my friends. And they were just like, no, you don't have to do that. She's like, no, he's gonna do it. You're gonna do it, huh? And she's abusing him verbally, and everyone was like, oh my, what is Angela? What the because they were embarrassed, and she's like, no, I told you this is our thing. So she's berating him, and he pays for all the food, and the guys and girls in the group were like, we got to talk to her. This is very uncomfortable. Yeah. We're now abusing this guy, and we didn't sign up for this. So while they're telling her, she's like, okay, then you're really going to hate this part. And she goes to him and she's like, go give me $1,000 right now from the ATM. He goes and withdraws $1,000. And then he's like, what are we doing now? And she's like, shut up, go to the room for the rest of the night. And then they basically had to do an intervention where they're like, this is unhealthy for everyone and you can't do this.
Right.
And she's like, I know, I feel bad, but also like he really likes it. So they had this talk with him where he's like, no, I appreciate this, I enjoy this. And she's like, it's kind of fun. But obviously, you can't have a serious relationship with somebody like that if you're a normal person. You're not a sociopath. So this is one of the weirdest things I've ever heard because I don't understand where that comes from. If somebody treated me like that for 1 second, I would. I would never stand for that. This guy wants more of that.
Yeah, I mean, generally, so this is what I would call sexualizing your trauma.
Yeah.
Right? So, like, we can fetishize our trauma in all kinds of different ways. And so, depending on what that guy's background was like and his upbringing, he might just be playing out some type of repetition of what he experienced as a kid or what he felt was happening as a kid. But, you know, this is the type of stuff that can start to unfold when, you know, you've just been watching so much porn that you're desensitized and you think that that's like a normal way of being. And, you know, in the BDSM community, they have a saying that I've interpreted as like, don't yuck my yum.
Yeah,
you know, like, don't poo-poo what I want to be doing.
They say that in my kids' pre-K class, and I cannot.
They say, don't yuck my yum?
They say, don't yuck other people's yums, which I think is a gross thing to say.
I get it in the BDSM community, but like...
So these little kids, it's funny because my son will be like, I don't like that book. And the teacher's like, don't yuck Angela's yum. And I'm like, ugh. You know? It's a great school and we love them, but this is just this
You're
one
like,
phrase.
this one thing
because I've read about it only from like kink shit on the internet.
Yeah,
and I'm
yeah,
like, can we, it's my own thing.
Yeah,
It's
and
my own
look,
thing.
there's merit to like moving through. Yeah. Yeah. Now that we're
It's
getting
hot in here, and I feel like I might have to edit that out so my kids don't get kicked out of their amazing school. We love them. It's just it is a funny thing. And now we say it in the house.
Yes.
And I'm like, Jen, can you not say that?
Yeah. Can we not say that?
It makes me feel itchy.
Yeah, but I mean, I think that these are some of the things that guys are dealing with. You know?
Yeah. So another example of this, this trauma thing, where it's more obvious. Same friend, had dinner with her the other night. Same dinner where this story came out. She's like, yeah, I'm going out with this guy, and he's like a wealthy New York, blue bloody family where like they probably have like a house in Nyack and a house in Manhattan, an apartment in Manhattan, and then another house in Hamptons or something like that. Like this guy's got dough, and his thing is he wants her to be mean to him, but sporadically and unpredictably. So like they'll be having a nice dinner and he'll say something and she'll, instead of going like rolling her eyes gently and being like, well, I disagree with that, he's like, no, I want you to tell me what you really think. And she's like, shut the hell up, that's the dumbest thing I've ever heard. And he's like, keep going, and she's like, why? And he's like, you know why? Because he's like getting turned on by it. And her and I were talking about this and I was like, yeah, if you ever meet his mom, I feel like you're going to understand what's going on here. Like, you're going to meet their parents, and the dad's going to be like, does anybody want dessert? And the mom's going to go, shut up, Tom, you're an idiot. We're talking. And you're going to go, ding, I get it. But then it's like, can you have a serious relationship with someone like that? You're marrying into this family with this trauma that they're not dealing with in a normal, like, healthy way. I don't know, man.
I mean, look, sometimes you can use kink and BDSM to move through some of those things, but those, what you're talking about are generally results of like pretty real and severe attachment disorders that lead to anxious and avoidant and disorganized and sometimes a result of like pretty severe trauma. And those types of things, they do require you to have some type of understanding of what's actually going on. You can't completely resolve them just through kink and BDSM play. You can, depending on the situation, you can definitely move through some of it. And I know some people that have used BDSM and kink as a means of like working through some of that stuff and reclaiming power from trauma or abuse or abandonment or neglect. And that absolutely can happen. But I think for a lot of people, it's not conscious like that. And it's just this repetition of a trauma, of a pain.
Yeah, I suppose if you've got your therapist and you're conscious of why you're doing it, but it still pushes the right buttons, that's different than being like, I have no idea why I like to have somebody punch me in the face randomly while we're driving the car. Just keep doing it. It's
I had a buddy of mine that like went to a kink party and he's like, everything was really cool except there was this one dude that wanted to be rolled up in a carpet and stepped on.
Stop.
And he was like, and I couldn't not think about it and like sit in the corner with a drink being like, what happened to that guy?
Yeah.
Like, what the happened to him? You know, he wants to be rolled up in a carpet and stepped on. I was like, I don't know, man. Like, I don't even want to get into that one.
One thing that I notice, I talk to a lot of women my own age, just friends of mine, and they'll say that when they sleep with younger guys, like if they're divorced or they're still single or whatever, younger guys, you would think, they think, oh yeah, this 28-year-old guy is going to like rock my world. My husband was 55 and wasn't really interested anymore because of hormones. They say they're terrible because they don't know really what they're doing because their sex ed is from porn.
Right.
And they have to be like, yeah, you know that doesn't feel good, right? That hurts. Or like, what are you doing? And I don't want to get too graphic, but they'll be graphic and I'm like, wait, guys think that that's real? And they think that that's real because they see it in porn.
Well, I mean, you look at some of the videos online, you know, like people going around and I don't know, what was it? A buddy of mine sent it to me. And it's like this guy just walking through the streets of like Vegas or somewhere and just asking people like thumb in or thumb out. He was asking women thumb in or thumb out. And he was talking about like having a thumb in the butt while they're having sex, right? And so it's so funny to see some of the people's faces. Like a lot of like the younger crowd like got the reference, but then anybody over like 35, 40, like no reference whatsoever. They're like, what are you talking about? Thumb in, thumb out? You're like, what?
So gross.
Yeah.
These guys are largely clueless, and I feel bad for them, right? Because how are you supposed to? You have to get feedback from somebody that's going to give you feedback, but a lot of the younger women they're sleeping with maybe don't even know that that's like okay. Maybe they don't even know. Like the woman they're sleeping with is like, it's not my job to teach you how to do this.
Yeah, I think there's a lot more sexual openness, but I wouldn't necessarily say that that's sexual literacy. Or sexual like competency. And like I remember being a young man and you know, I think I was fortunate in some ways, like being able to get attention from women wasn't like always challenging, but it was still really confronting. You know, like the risk of rejection and like feeling embarrassed. But I was at that very like interesting intersection between I had access to porn, but I also had access to women.
Yeah.
And I think about the men today, and if I had the access to porn in the way that there is today, I don't know if I would have been as relentless and pursuing relationships with women because like porn is just this easy access, low risk, high reward experience, right? Where like, you don't have to get told no. You're not going to get rejected in any way, shape, or form. You can explore whatever the hell it is that you want. And there's like really no real risk of embarrassment. Whereas in real life, all of those things exist, you know? Like you have to risk being rejected and embarrassed and sometimes humiliated, having like a humiliating experience if you can't get it up or you come too fast. And so I think for a lot of guys, it's like this linear, you know, problem-solving tool where it's like, oh, I don't have to deal with anything. And then the other reason why it's so addictive for a lot of men is it's what I call the nervous system reset button. So if you're stressed out, if you're feeling lonely, if you're feeling bored, if you're feeling angry, if you and your girlfriend got in an argument and you're pissed off at her, porn is the ultimate reset button for your whole system. And so you go jerk off, you ejaculate, a whole bunch of neurochemicals, dopamine, prolactin, they all course through your body relaxes, and it shifts how you were feeling before. So for a lot of guys, it's a state change tool, right? It's like as soon as you're feeling something that you don't like, what a lot of guys will go do is jerk off and watch porn, and then they don't have to feel that anymore. But what ends up happening for a lot of men is it creates a dependency. And so they, in order to feel better, in order to not feel bored, lonely, angry, sad, whatever it is, they need porn in order to do that. And for some men, it becomes so, they become so dependent on it for very specific things, like going to bed at night. I've worked with men where they're like, in order to go to sleep, I need to jerk off and watch porn. And other guys, it's like, in order to start my day, I need to jerk off and watch porn. Like, that's how I have to start things. Otherwise, I'm a mess.
This might be above your pay grade here, but what if you make the porn with your significant other and you use that and it's not from the internet? Is that better?
I mean, sure.
Asking for a friend.
Yeah,
Sorry,
yes,
Jen.
yes.
Sorry, wife.
Sorry,
I'm not
babe.
talking about you.
Sure,
Well,
yes.
Or wait, that came out even worse. This is a hypothetical.
You're like,
I'm in trouble. I'm in
should
trouble
I
now.
edit that part out?
Nope, I'm leaving it in, but I'm just going to leave it there and let you talk. Please start talking.
Yes, yes, it is. And if you still have a dependency on the porn over the real life sexual experience, it's going to be hindering your relationship. Ideally, what the average human being is actually wanting is skin to skin. Penetration, right? Like
so sorry to clarify, is it better if you're making it in your, like, let's say you're traveling a lot, so you make some with your significant other, is that's still bad?
No.
Oh, it's not
No,
as bad.
not at all. Explore, have fun, send within modern, like whatever is within your relationship, right? Like,
well, yeah,
send the
I'm talking about
nudes
consensual, like, hey, I miss you. Here's a picture of me in front of the mirror. I just mean, is that better than like watching a stranger get banged on OnlyFans?
I think for the majority of people, I like that. I was just going to answer that question. Straight-faced is banged on OnlyFans. Yeah. I think for the majority of people in relationships, that is what they're looking for. For some people it's not. Right? For some people it's, maybe you're playing around with, I want you to go and, watch some chick on OnlyFans tonight. Like, that can be it for some people. But I think for the majority of people in relationships, they are wanting sexual exploration with their partner.
Yeah.
And that's fulfilling and satisfying. And however you want to do that, whether it's, sexting or FaceTiming and exploring it in that way, like for some clients, that I've worked with in the past, like I'll have them explore power dynamics, and if they're traveling a lot, as an example, there's so many different ways to do that. Creating a separate phone number sometimes, or like a WhatsApp, and pretending, that there's like a role play there. And,
I see. Oh, that's kind of a cool idea.
So there's a whole bunch of there's a whole bunch of different ways that you can do things. But I think generally for most people, and you and your partner have to figure out whether, because some people classify porn as cheating and some people don't.
That's true.
And
I've seen that.
You kind of have to have that conversation and be open and transparent of, do you use porn? Do you watch it? Does your partner use porn and watch it? Is that something that you want to do in your relationship? Like, all of those things are important. And I think for a lot of guys, the challenge is that we treat porn like we treat unwanted emotions, which is, I'm never going to talk about my relationship to porn. And so they get into a long-term relationship, some stuff starts to happen, starts to go sideways. They watch more porn and more porn and more porn. They're not communicating to their girlfriend or their wife. And then all of a sudden it comes out that they've been watching a whole bunch. And it creates this big rupture in the relationship.
Yeah.
Right? Because it hasn't been talked about. It's been hidden. It's been suppressed. And that's just a recipe for disaster. Anytime that you suppress stuff and are hiding things actively, even if it's lying through omission, you're going to cause a pretty big rupture and conflict somewhere down the road.
I see this kind of post all the time online on our sub or other ones where there's a existing relationship issue, like, my boyfriend's not interested in sex at all anymore and hasn't been for several months. And then it's like, oh, and I found out he's watching porn. So because there's a major difference between, wow, he's just really stressed out and he doesn't have any sex drive. I'm concerned about him. Is it me or is it something else?
Right.
Oh, he's using porn. Now it's definitely just, I'm not good enough as a female or whatever in his life that it's way worse, right? When they find that.
Yeah, and a lot of guys have so much shame around it that when it does come out, it's like this shame becomes crippling for them. It's like, oh, what's wrong with me? I'm such a piece of crap.
They promise to never use it again.
Yeah, I
but
promise
then they
to
have
never
no
use it
outlet
again.
for this
it's like
stuff.
But you have no tools to actually stop using it, and you become dependent on it. And so, it for a lot of men. I mean, I'll speak personally. It took me a long time to stop watching porn.
I basically quit cold turkey,
time.
But that's how I quit things. Is I just never do it again.
Porn was one of those. Like, I like to say that I was a hobbyist addict. Like, I dabbled in different addictions.
Really?
But porn was probably like my main one for a long time.
How long did it take to quit?
Probably a year and a half.
Really? So you just kept going, like, relapse back into it, or?
Yeah, just relapsing into it, and just kind of like, okay, this is the last time. I'm never going to use it again. Like a lot of those like lottery mindset, promising orientations, and it had been in my life for such a long time, and I think that's the case for a lot of guys, where it's like a really hard thing to quit. And what I like to say is, you with addiction specifically, because most addictions are attachment issues, is that you can't replace addiction without relationship. And so if you want to have some type of real replacement for porn, and it's not something that you can just quit cold turkey, right? Like for you, you're just like, I'm done.
That's how I quit stuff, but it's not the easiest way.
Some guys can do that though. Some guys can literally say, I'm going to go no fap for the next 6 months. I'm not going to masturbate. I'm not going to nut. I'm not going to watch porn.
I didn't say that.
And they can.
I just said no porn.
I know.
No, those guys are on another level.
That's like a hardcore.
I don't know how you resist that.
Yeah, but some guys can just do that because it's just like some people can say, I'm not going to drink this month, and it's no problem. And other people, it's just like, I am struggling to not have a drink. And so porn is that for a lot of men now. And I think it's one of the most underreported addictions that we have to date, period.
I would agree with that. I mean, I have no evidence for this, but I would guess if I got to ask 50 guys that I knew decently well if they did cocaine, drank too much, smoked too much weed, ate too much junk food, or watched too much porn, I don't know which ones would be very upfront about the porn thing.
Totally.
I think they would probably sooner admit that they were doing tons of blow and smoking weed every day and eating Cheetos every day than they would be to be like, 3 times a day with Pornhub. I don't think most guys would admit that. They would admit using it because guys talk about that kind of stuff. I don't think they would ever be honest about the frequency if it was bad.
Totally. Well, it wasn't until I was more candid about my usage with porn that I actually was able to move away from it, and the struggle and the challenge that I was having with it. And I think that's the case for a lot of guys. It's like they become dependent on it. And here's what I'll say, like maybe I'll just talk personally for a moment, but like I had an issue with porn while in relationships, while cheating in relationships.
Oh, wow.
And so like sex was a big challenge for me in a lot of ways. And porn was just an outlet where, I could turn towards that whenever I wanted, because it's just there, it's on your computer, it's in your pocket. It's like having a liquor cabinet in your pocket that you can pull out at any time, and a dispenser at any time for weed, but it doesn't cost you anything, which is like, it's mental, right? It's just crazy. And
you can drive afterwards.
And you
can just wash your hands.
You can drive afterwards. Maybe not during. If you can, like, good for you.
Some people are definitely driving.
Tesla's self-driving.
Yeah, that's right.
There you go. That's why Elon created it.
Good Lord.
But I think it's one of those things where, in order to overcome it, you have to face the shame and the embarrassment of what's actually been going on.
Yeah.
And you kind of like have to eat the humble pie for a little bit.
The whole idea that you need more and more extreme stuff, that's really got to be scary.
Totally.
Because I would imagine that one day, that kind of never really happened to me, I think probably because I didn't use it frequently enough and then got rid of it. But I would imagine there's guys out there that one day are just like, how am I sitting here watching AI alien porn?
Right.
What is going on?
Well, I think it was 2022 or 2023. I think it was 2023. The number one most searched word on Pornhub was hentai. And hentai is anime porn.
Anime porn.
Right? And so that's the number one most searched thing. And then, you have all kinds of other stuff. But a lot of it is, it's not even based in reality. And that's kind of where it's heading, right? It's like AI is going to completely flip the porn industry. I don't know if you've seen this, but there are entire content creators now that don't exist. The script is AI, the woman is AI, the platform is AI. Everything is just completely AI. And so we're going to be even more removed, because right now, if a guy goes online and he's watching porn, at least it's a real person, right? If he goes on to a webcam site and he's like talking to some chick, yeah, it's a real woman, but maybe he's talking to some dude behind the camera, right? That's like typing for her, right?
Oh, interesting.
Or if he goes on OnlyFans, same thing. Like a lot of those OnlyFans, when you talk to them, the likelihood that it's actually that woman is very, very, very low.
I read a piece about
very
this,
low.
I think in Wired or something, and there's whole industries where these chatters are paid about $1 an hour.
Yeah.
And because some of the more popular creators are talking with thousands of people at once, so they hire these agencies to chat.
Right.
And
they're AI bots now, by the way.
A lot of them are AI bots, and a lot of them are just like $1 an hour paid, and they're probably training the AI bot that's copying the things that they say. It's really crazy. Yeah, I'm sure if the person has 15 followers, it's probably them answering the DMs. But the popular ones, they use these services. That's insane.
Well, there's a guy that I saw on Instagram the other day that was talking. I think he was selling a course on how to do this, which was kind of funny. But he created an AI program that basically turned him into a filter. So he would record himself, saying sexy things or like sending a specific like voice message like, "Hey Jordan, how's your day?" and blah, blah, blah. And the AI filter would turn him into a beautiful blonde woman with big boobs, and it would alter his voice. And so it was literally him just recording himself, but what you saw was this beautiful blonde woman, speaking some sexy message to you.
Gosh, that's crazy.
And he's allegedly making tens of thousands of dollars a month.
I saw something similar yesterday on Instagram. However, it was deep fakes of celebrities, and it was the guy showing. He had a light, and he would shine it on his face. And
I saw that. Oh yeah,
wasn't that incredible?
Turned into Elon.
Turned into like Timothy Chalamet or something. I don't even know who these people are, but I guess
Chalamet.
He turned into Chalamet. He turned into. I saw Adam Sandler at a sushi place the other day. It was funny, and I almost yelled out Chalamet really loud. But then I thought, why be that guy?
Yeah.
He did a couple of other, like Star Wars. What's Mark Hamill, the guy who plays Luke Skywalker? Yeah. It was so convincing, my man.
So real.
I couldn't believe it, and then I was just like, well, make damn sure you're never talking to anybody online. If you don't say anything you wouldn't want to say in front of a perfect stranger who knows how to use AI deepfake software.
That's it. Well, and I think it's detrimental. I think two things are going to happen, and I think that women are going to start to be disproportionately impacted as well. I think men are going to be more and more sucked down this rabbit hole of AI pornography that's just hyper realistic and virtual reality oriented and customized for them, and that's like personalization is going to be king. And is starting to be king, not just in the porn industry, but I think even in like the mental health space, in the therapy space. Like, one of the biggest use cases for ChatGPT is apparently therapy. That people are using ChatGPT. And I've had people that have told me this, like that have reached out and said, hey, I've been using ChatGPT as like my coach, and I've told it to be like Eckhart Tolle and Connor Beaton and to give me life advice. And they're like, it's incredibly profound. It's so good. I was like, what? What are you talking about? Yeah. So I think men are going to go down this rabbit hole of, more and more AI oriented because it's just going to look so real. And I think what's going to start to happen with women, and there's already apps. I think there's an app called Dipsy, DIPSE, where it's basically AI erotica. And because for women, it's a very different, like women get caught in like the story. And so like some women will get addicted to pornography, but what more women will get addicted to is the romance novels. And they'll get really sucked into these like hyper erotic romance novels. And you're going to start to see these very personalized romance novels where you as a woman are in the story, and the hero or the guy that's sort of like sexualizing is going to be sexualizing you. It's not going to be sexualizing this like damsel that you're projecting yourself onto. They're actually going to be sexualizing you. So you get to be a part of this erotica, and then I think it'll be personalized into maybe a video or something like that, and you can tailor it. But I mean, we're not far off from that. It's like the porn industry, and I think the last thing I'll say is, I think OnlyFans models, what you're going to start to see is that real life models are going to start to charge more of a premium because the AI at some point is likely going to have to be tagged. And you'll see this whole industry come out where, men are fetishizing women that aren't even real, and they know that, and they're having relationships with women. And, that's like that movie Her with Joaquin Phoenix. It's but porn.
Well, I can't say that I'm not curious about that because it seems really interesting, but I can see that being horrifically bad for you if you really get interested in it.
Yeah. I mean, it might be a salve for some people. I think in Japan that's already starting to happen where there's such a separation between the men and women. And I think that for a lot of guys out there, they've just kind of like given up on hope of being in any type of relationship with a woman. And so, I don't know. I struggle with it sometimes.
Instead of the porn element, though, I want the advisor. I want like, okay, this thing knows me really well. What would I tell myself if I were not emotionally invested in this problem? What would the smart Jordan? And then maybe add in like, a little bit of, I don't know, some super, what would Oprah plus Jordan plus my wife plus my dad tell me to do in this particular, plus my best friend, plus my producer, plus these 10 super smart show guests? What would those people amalgamated into one brain tell me to do about this particular problem? That seems really cool.
And I think that's there. Like that'll start to happen. But I think what young men start to do is use these tools to help them develop competency versus what's happening right now, which is avoid the risk of rejection and embarrassment. Like that's really how these tools are being used in a lot of ways. And so, you could have like a bot that's supporting you in learning how to talk to women better in real life and like how to get through some of these challenges.
Let's talk about fatherless kids and the time we have left here, which is quickly coming to a close. 43% of U.S. children live without their father. That's way more than I was hoping to see. 90% of homeless and runaway children are from fatherless homes. 71% of pregnant teenagers lack a father. That's, I guess, not surprising, but that's still sad. A lot of youth suicides from fatherless homes. I mean, the stats are damning. 85% of children who exhibit behavioral disorders. Fatherless homes.
You got to give the arsonist.
Let me see. Where
90% of repeat arsonists.
Did I? Yeah. Oh, yeah. That was the next one. Yeah. 90% of repeat arsonists. That's really. This whole thing is just crazy. Kids in juvenile state facilities, 85% of youth in prison, fatherless home. I mean, this is 75% of patients, adolescent patients in chemical abuse centers, fatherless homes. This is horrible.
Yeah, 85% of behavioral disorders in kids are in kids that have no father in the home. The interesting thing is, if you look at the data, 1 in 4 children won't have a father figure in the house at all. No dad, no stepdad, nothing. So 25% of kids, won't have their father in a home, and then 43% don't have any father in the home. So it's a pretty, it's a pretty wild thing to start to look at. But then when you start to look at the impact of that, and then you break it down, young boys will disproportionately be impacted by this. So we do see that young girls have, sometimes a proclivity towards more hypersexuality and, teen pregnancy, things like that. But things like socialization, friend groups, academics, all of those things generally tend to stay on average and aren't really that affected because they have their mother in the house. Whereas young boys like really start to go off the rails. Adverse behavior, acting out, taking big risks, self-harm starts to go up quite a bit and this is like a new thing that's happening in the younger generations now, where young boys are disproportionately harming themselves more than they ever have. So things like cutting and self-abuse, that's starting to go up. And so, the role of the father is incredibly, incredibly important, especially for young boys, because number one, it's really supposed to model what a man can look like. So it gives that young boy a trajectory. It's like, this is where I could go or shouldn't go, even if it's not great, right? It's like, even if that man is lacking in ambition and, he's got some anger problems and that kind of stuff, it at least gives that young boy like guardrails, kind of like the bowling alley analogy. It's like, put the guardrails up.
It's interesting you should say that, because I've seen and heard quite a few guys say, I had a terrible father. He cheated on my mom and he used to drink too much. And I'm thankful because I know I do the opposite of the things my dad would do. And I'm like, is that just a weird cope? And they're like, no, I'm actually glad that I grew up with this person because I have a model for what not to do. But if you had no father, now you are stabbing in the dark because you don't know, you don't have a real role model for how your behavior affects others in some way.
Yeah, and I think one of the other things that's not really in this data, because those are completely absent fathers, is what I call ghost dad. And ghost dad is the dad that's
Bill
either
Cosby movie from 1984.
Is it?
I think it is. Yeah, I can't look it up right now, but I think.
Oh my gosh, that's great! I didn't even know that reference. Ghost dad is basically the dad that's there but not. He's around but is emotionally disconnected, doesn't really take interest in your life, doesn't really teach you much of anything, and so he's essentially absent. Another version of this that we see is when divorce happens and a young boy is separated from his father and he only sees them, once a month or once every couple months. And so that can have a very similar impact on a young boy. So one is having a man in the house gives that young boy some trajectory towards what he could move towards and what he should avoid, like what's working and what's not working. And kids are very perceptive. And so they know very quickly, like, oh, dad's anger sucks. He's constantly being passive aggressive to mom, and he's, yelling at me all the time. Like, he's kind of a dick and kind of an asshole. And so I don't want to be like that. But it gives that young boy something to push up against, which is a very, very important part. And so that's one piece. The second piece is, generally speaking, fathers will have to do a couple things for kids, but for young boys especially. The first one is risk incentivization. So mothers statistically and traditionally will try and get their kids to take less risks and actually be safer. And fathers will actually encourage risks.
Yeah, I can see that even in my own family.
100%. Same with mine and my wife. And my wife is like very, very progressive, very liberal in a lot of ways. But even with her, I see her like, oh, should he be on that? Should he be jumping off that? Like, he's on those rocks over there. And some of that, is her family system, because her parents do it too when they're over. I just witnessed, they're like, should he be staying on those rocks? I'm like, he's fine.
Yeah.
Well, what if he falls? I'm like, then he falls.
People fall.
And he's going to hurt himself. He's going to learn not to stand there anymore, right?
Yeah.
And so, I think the risk encouragement is a big part of it, and it encourages that boy specifically to go out and face the hardship that we've been talking about this entire podcast, right? To face the hardship of the rejection, the not, defaulting to these coping mechanisms like pornography or, chronically smoking weed every single day. It incentivizes him to have to go forward and do hard things. Like, generally, fathers are there encouraging their sons, or sometimes maybe more forcefully getting their sons to do hard things. So the risk piece is a big part of it. And then the last piece is regulating intense emotions. Sometimes through rough and tumble play. Like, my son is 4 years old and he is so physical. He's just such a physical kid. My daughter's not like that.
Yeah, my daughter gets so annoyed when I wrestle with her. My son loves it.
My daughter kind of likes it, but my son like goes full, Hulk, on it. And I'm not like encouraging him to do that. But, when young boys go at 3 years old, there's a spike in their testosterone. And so sort of like from birth until 3 years old, it's sort of all the same levels. But then at 3, there's like a pre-spike. So it's almost like a much smaller version of what you'll see in teenage years as they go through puberty. And that's why when you see 3 to 4 years old young boys start to sometimes bite and hit and become more aggressive.
It's good to know that that's a normal
thing. And you're like, what? I remember being like, and I know the data. I'm being like, is this normal? Like, what my son's going through? Like, is he all right?
We called him our three-nager.
Yeah.
He'd be like, I'm not doing that. And he'd go get his Nerf gun, start opening fire, and we're like, okay, that's a little disturbing, pal. Yeah. By the way, Ghost Dad, 1990. Bill Cosby. He's been walking through doors. He's been falling through floors. He's been going through a lot lately, but he's still dad.
Wow.
Yeah, corny.
Yeah, some of that didn't age well for Cosby.
Oh yeah, Bill Cosby? No. Pretty much the whole thing aged like milk.
Yeah, pretty much. But I think for a lot of young boys that being able to regulate your intense emotions is another big part of it. And so when you don't have that, when you have a vacancy of learning how to do that, there's a much more hyper reliance on your mom in order to teach you how to do that. And so you have a lot of young men that have been taught how to deal with their emotions from their mother. And that can lead, it's not to put down moms in any way, shape, or form.
No, they're the ones that are there when the dads are gone.
That's right.
We're doing the opposite of trying to put the moms down.
That's right.
Just to be clear.
Yeah. And sometimes, depending on what that mom's gone through, so if she shames his anger, good boys don't get angry, real men don't allow themselves to get angry, he can disconnect or even disassociate from his anger. And, we need some connection to our anger in order for example, to even set boundaries or know if a boundary's been crossed. Like that's part of the marker that a boundary's been crossed. And so a lot of these men, a lot of these boys grow up to be men that have no boundaries. They don't stand up for themselves. They're sort of like chronic or classic nice guys that, never insert themselves in a relationship. And then, that can lead to some of the stuff that we've been talking about of, it's too hard for me to go and talk to a woman or be in a relationship. Yeah. It's just easier for me to go jerk off and watch porn and be in these little forums online and have my digital friends and not need to deal with the hardship of, being in a relationship. And so those things can snowball really quickly.
Yeah, that's interesting. I can definitely see the line that you would draw between someone who was raised without a dad learning to become a really nice person and then having that kind of blow up in their face with the people-pleasing stuff and having that result in broken relationships, lack of attraction, getting walked all over in a relationship, turning that into, well, women cheat and break your heart and, break over your boundary. I'd rather not deal with that. And then ... incel, or just a guy who says things like all women cheat. I see that a lot. And I'm just like, oh my God, a significant number of men believe this. That's really horrible.
Yeah. Well, I think it's a deep fear that a lot of men have.
It's a deep fear for everybody, I think, but I don't think all women cheat. Yes, it's a deep fear for me too, but I don't think all women cheat. I think some women do.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I did this video because I won't give too much background for it, but I did this one video where I was talking about getting clear on what your fears are of women and what you're afraid of when it comes to women, because the reality is that men and women hold different power. Women are generally afraid of what a man can or would do physically, and men are generally afraid of what a woman could do character or socially. And for a lot of guys, I think they're just disconnected from that fear, or it's all encompassing. There's such a deep terror of you could destroy me and my character or my reputation, or, you could break my heart by going and cheating on somebody and, just terrorize them. But that has nothing to do with Dad. That's just a little aside.
No, but that stuff is interesting. I mean, endlessly fascinating. I know we're out of time, man. Thanks for doing this. Long overdue.
Yeah.
Maybe in the next 10 years we can do another one.
Yeah.
We'll see.
We'll do another one in 7 or 8 years.
That's right. Yeah. Sounds good to me, man. Thanks for coming in.
Thank you so much.